Hello, hello, my friends. Today, today we are talking about habits. And what I want to focus in on are a couple things. First of all, the question that I asked in the post about this was, has working 50 to 80 hours a week become a habit for you? And has saying no or saying yes to everything become a habit? You know, there are several work habits that you may have that you might not realize are a habit that really aren't serving you. And these might be people pleasing, emailing at all hours, never saying no, or saying yes too many times, working while on your days off, on vacation, working evenings, working weekends, being in back to back meetings and not having any time for work or any time for deep work. And so I want to talk about, we've talked about this probably several times already, but I want to talk a little bit first about the impact that this is having on that this could be having on you. So there's so many things that these different habits, people pleasing, can create stress and anxiety when we're trying constantly to make sure that everyone else is okay, and that will lead to chronic stress and anxiety. Overextending yourself to meet the needs of meet others expectation, can result in burnout. It can create resentment towards coworkers, towards family members, towards leaders. And it can also, that people pleasing really creates an inauthentic relationship, inauthentic connections. A coach that I've worked with said that people pleasing is essentially lying, because people pleasing is often doing things when and saying yes to things when you really want to say no. And you can really lose your sense of autonomy and lose your sense of self. Some of these other habits, like emailing out at all hours, can cause sleep disruption if we're constantly on our phones or on our computers. And it can also create stress. And I've talked about this before in terms of, it doesn't give your brain that ability to actually take time off and rest. And what's interesting is oftentimes you can put your brain to work on problems that you're trying to solve, things that you're trying to figure out and work on while you're doing active rest, whether that active rest is doing a puzzle, going for a walk, not necessarily binging social media or binging TV. You really want to try to include active rest. Some other things that can happen, some other impacts before we get into some of the reasons for these. Let's just talk through some of the impacts. Some of the other impacts can be overwhelm, physical health issues. When we have chronic stress from overcommitment, from not saying no, from people pleasing, that can lead to physical health issues. It can also put a strain on our relationships. We can create a loss of trust when we're constantly overcommitting at work. That is impacting our relationships at home and can then create some issues there. What are some other things? The quality of your work. I've heard many people tell me that when they were able to say no, when they were able to cut off their hours at a particular time without working into the evenings or working on their vacations, that they actually had better quality ideas, better quality work. And so it can improve the quality of your work by learning to say no, by learning to, shut down at a particular time, whether, for some people it's 4:30, for some people it's 5:30 or 6, whatever it is, give yourself some time in the evenings. Okay, so these are all some reasons why. Just even life satisfaction, reduced enjoyment. If you're working on vacations, that, you're not giving your body and your brain and your spirit time to actually unwind and recharge. Your brain needs recharge, and it needs recharge multiple times throughout the day, every evening, weekends. It isn't just the weekend and vacations. And I talked about this, I think, last week, that give your body the needed rest, and give your brain that rest in order to be its best for you, its most creative for you. Some other things when we think about not having time for deep work, which is one of the things we're going to talk about. When you don't allow yourself, why is it important to have that time for deep work? One is you're going to stall your career growth. When you are constantly in this meeting, back-to-back meeting, bing, 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 back-to-back, and not having time, you're not tapping your fullest potential. You're not tapping your genius necessarily when you can't think as a leader, you can't think strategically. You might not fulfill your potential. You're going to impair your communications when you're in this constant, because when you're in those back-to-back meetings and go, 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 it puts your brain and your body in that fight, flight, or freeze, which is a stress response. And having all of that stress response actually takes your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, takes it offline, because we don't need that when we're being chased by a lion. And being in that chronic stress mode thinks it's the same. Your body thinks it's being chased by a lion and that it's going to be eaten. So let's talk now. Let's go into a little bit of details. And I'm only going to cover a couple of these. So we talked about people pleasing, emailing at all hours, never saying no, working vacations. I'm going to cover a couple of these: the no time for deep work, the back-to-back meetings. I'm going to cover a couple of them here, and then I'm going to share a few more in posts as I go throughout the week, and maybe even into next week, and in my email that I will send out this Thursday. So, people pleasing. I've seen it in very respected people, people I respect who are great leaders in big organizations, will publicly say, "Oh, I'm a people pleaser," and like it's who I am. These are habits. These are patterns that are not who you are. They're just patterns and habits that can be broken. And so, an example of it might be always agreeing to take on new work. Even when your plate is already full, you take on additional tasks to avoid disappointing your colleagues or your leaders, or maybe you think that you have to take on all of these tasks in order to get the next promotion. Constantly seeking approval. When you routinely ask for feedback or validations on your decisions, on projects, on content that you're creating for maybe a presentation. Another people pleasing is conflict avoidance, which we'll probably cover again. Well, we will cover again in another area. But by suppressing your own opinions, by needing to maintain and avoid potential disagreements, that is a form of people pleasing. And so we do this out of sometimes the need for acceptance, sometimes the need for approval. Sometimes we think it's necessary for promotions, or to get an assignment on a particular project. And it's also an internalized, what I want to focus on too is this internalized belief, because so many of these, there can be, when we look at some of the solutions that I'm going to talk through, some of the strategies, they're probably things that you already know that are pretty basic. When let me see where my notes are on this one. Going into a deeper internal view, an internal exploration, and really looking at why we're doing some of these things can be so helpful for people. So let's look at strategies. So, for example, people pleasing, setting clear boundaries. Um, and part of that requires you to really look at your um, your values and what you're looking at in terms of um, what your core values are, and what are you valuing something because it is a core need, or is it a need that you developed in childhood? And these are things I work on with my clients. A lot of this comes back to that those three concentric circles: our core self, our developed self, and our contextual self. Our developed self are these habits and patterns. People pleasing is not a part of our core self. We don't come into the world being people pleasers. We learn that. That's a learned behavior in order to get love, approval. And so there's some deep work, some internal self-reflection on your core values, on your core needs, to see, am I doing this out of a developed sense, a developed habit of wanting to get that approval, get that validation, get that love? Let's take one more before I close out here for today. This actually, when I look at this could be a couple of hours workshop, which I think I may actually make that into. But when we're let's talk about back-to-back meetings, because that's something I see so often. And some examples of that are really, you have no buffer time, number one. You're in back-to-back meetings. You don't even have time to use the restroom. So you're probably drinking less water, which is not good for your health. You're scheduling things without any breaks in between. You're attending meetings. You may be attending meetings that aren't even necessary for you to attend. You may just have an overloaded calendar, loading your calendar with meetings, leaving no time for other work. And sometimes that is because we're not really getting critical about whether a meeting is necessary or not, and whether our attendance is necessary. So a lot of times we equate that full calendar with productivity. A lot of times it's not productive at all. And we think that we want to be able to, we need to attend these meetings because we have to stay informed. And I've seen people, I know a guy who would have two different sets of headphones, one connected to his phone, one connected to his computer. So he'd have an earbud in each ear, listening to two different meetings. That doesn't work. Your brain cannot concentrate. It's either on one or the other, and you're going to miss things anyway. So these things, it might be poor time management, but if you're a leader, you probably don't have poor time management. But it is, it could be that you just really feel this pressure to be informed because maybe at one point somebody asked you about something and you didn't have the answer. And that is, sometimes an embarrassment, or feeling inadequate, or feeling an imposter, or not knowing, when really, hey, let me get back to you on that. Here's who's in the loop on that on my team. And so really making sure you can have some buffer time in between meetings. Some companies are giving, instead of hour-long meetings, only 50-minute meetings, 50. Or if it is an inform, can we ask that it be done? If it's really an inform type meeting, can we inform via email? Or even a video message? Send an email with a video message with the inform, that instead of bringing everybody into a room and having all that time, you can take a few minutes just to listen to a video. And the other thing is to really evaluate the impact that you're having in your organization. And is your presence at every single one of those meetings having the impact that you want to have in your career, in your role, and having the impact in order for you to continue to grow and change in your organization? develop your own sense of assertiveness and boundaries, and also really less is more. Focus on your genius and on your team's genius. How can you delegate down to people on your team or even across to your peers and say, hey, look, this project is, I think, better served in your group, or maybe one of your team members might be someone who could really develop by having them attend those meetings. And really see, and this one goes into the next one, which I'll talk more about in my email, which is really reserving time on your calendar for uninterrupted work. I can't even imagine the mental stress. I know some people who I've worked with at client sites who are, double, triple, quadrupled, quintuply booked. They've got 5 meetings that people have asked them to attend. And, Microsoft, Google, whatever, find a way so that people, the calendar can't be blocked. People can't request you at, 4 different meetings at the same time. And so the last one I'll cover quickly because this is going a little longer than I had intended, but really when you don't have time for deep work, okay? When the deep work, some examples of it is when you're constantly being interrupted, whether that's people walking in your door if you're on site. A big one is DMs, whether that's on Teams or in Slack or whatever your direct message for your organization is. Or it might also even be interruptions on your screen. For example, the little sound and pop-up that comes up for every email that you get. That is a distraction that is dissuading you from actually doing deep work. So whether you have a high volume of tasks or interruptions, a misconception that multitasking is efficient, which it isn't, or a lack of prioritization and a lack of time management, or it might even be that you have lost sight of your zone of genius and lost sight of how you can develop the zone of genius for your people, because each person on your team also needs that time. So, a few tactical things you can do are to create those focus blocks and really set up boundaries with your team that says, and with your peers that says, I'm not going to accept a meeting, and decline those meetings. Don't just leave it on your calendar. Decline it or forward it. Have someone else attend a meeting and really get those blocks honored. Type of multitasking. Try not to catch up on email while you're on a meeting. If you're going to be on a meeting, be present. And then review your commitments. Really review and assess. And this is kind of what I said earlier in terms of what's most necessary for you to make the impact that you want to make as a leader. And think about shifting your mindset about multitasking. Shift your mindset around deep work. And when you first start deep work, it might be an hour. It might be, but I know they recommend that a maximum of like 4 hours for deep work. But it's a matter of cultivating patience and not allowing yourself to get distracted. And it's never going to be 100%. We're not trying for that. Even if you can get 10% better over the course of several weeks, you're going to get 60 to 80% better. That would be amazing. And because when you practice saying no to things that are coming to your calendar that are overlapping your deep work, you're fulfilling your purpose, you're having the greatest impact as a leader, and you're setting the example for your teams to do the same, so that when you promote them into leadership, that they are also using these same practices, that they are creating the same level of impact, the same level of contribution and fulfillment of their purpose. So in summary, there's, these different things in terms of why should you care about these areas of of habits that might need to shift, whether it's not saying no, emailing at all hours, people pleasing, back-to-back meetings, the lack of deep work. Each one of these is eroding your impact. And it's also eroding your health, and it could be eroding your relationships. So, what can you say yes to? What habits are you looking to shift? If you are struggling in some of these areas, and again, if you'd like to get on my email list, DM me and let me know. I will be sharing even more details on this, and I'll probably write an article because I think it warrants a little bit more coverage and more detail. These strategies you want to break these habits. Working 60 to 80 hours a week is going to erode your health over time. It's going to lead you to an early death over time. It is going to impact your relationships, both at home and at work and with friends. And it will also just erode your mental capacity. So, to improve your mental capacity, to improve your health, to improve your sleep, to improve your relationships, take a look at these habits and see which one you can start to uh, pull back from a little bit and shift. And if you need help with that, DM me and let's talk about whether coaching might be right for you to help you shift these habits. Thanks, and have a great rest of your week.